I'm going to share the story of how I was introduced to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I grew up in Chicago, and my mother had my grandmother. Her roots were in um, the Upper Peninsula. So my mom had a great aunt, Aunt Helen, that she was very close to. So this would be my grandma's sister. So it'd be my great aunt, my mom's aunt. So I was introduced to the UP because we would come up to their farm in the summer and in the winter, both, um, and stay with her. And they had a 175-acre farm. So, and it was in Power Spalding. It's like on the other side of Bark River. So it was like an adventure for me and my sister when we came up here because we were from the city. You know, we didn't see wide open spaces like a 175-acre farm that we could just run free on. So the first time we were introduced, it was in the summer, and I was 8. And I remember going down this long dirt road, and then there was a long road to get to the house. It was set back, and my sister and I had all kinds of adventures. As we rolled up, there were big apple fields that we would go ahead and play in, and they had an old barn because the farm. When I was introduced to the farm, it wasn't a working farm anymore. They had actually leased their land out to farmers, working farmers on each side of them, so they could grow crops for their cattle. But my aunt Helen and my uncle Adolf, when they did, when it was a working farm, they had milking cows, and they had and they grew corn. So they would share all kinds of stories with us. And my sister and I got to go play in the big barn where the cows used to stay. And then my great aunt Helen, she was a great storyteller, so she loved sharing the family history. Her mom and dad, and she had 3 other siblings. But her mom and dad and her 3 siblings, my aunt Helen was the youngest, but they came over on the boat. They were immigrants from Poland, so they came in through Ellis Island. And so that's kind of how they got here. Their maiden name was Kleekot. And then my uncle Adolf, of course, was German. And they were farmers in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And so when I was introduced to the farm, like I said, it wasn't a working farm anymore. But I have amazing memories and great stories. My Aunt Helen, she had a golf cart. And so she used to take us through the fields on golf carts so we could go all the way to the back because it was such a huge farm. And then she would tell us stories how years and years ago the gypsies, that was a path that they used to take. They used to cross through their land when they were moving on to somewhere else. And the land was magical because I remember there was a big lake on their property, but it was a mud lake. And it had an island in it, and the island would float around. So sometimes it would be in the middle, sometimes it would be on the shore. But the fear of God was put into us, and we were told that, we could see the lake, but we had to stay back because it was almost like, it was a mud lake. It was almost like, kind of like quicksand, but not, my uncle Adolf would tell the story of how his dad had lost the 2 horses he lost in the mud lake. But that's when we were introduced to like the pitcher plants and lady slipper flowers and trilliums, and those are all flowers and plants that you're not supposed to pick. So like I said, it was magical. So my Aunt Helen would take us through there, and she would teach us about all of this stuff. And then we learned, my mom and I and my sister learned how to bake with my great Aunt Helen. We learned how to can. We were introduced to what a root cellar was. She grew up on the farm, and she probably went to school like just through 8th grade. Again, it was my great Aunt Helen because she was needed on the farm, so she would help her mom cook for the farmers. You know, she'd get up early with them in the morning and cook breakfast before they'd go out in the fields and work, and then help her clean up and then cook lunch and dinner. So then she was also needed to go out when it was harvest time. And so, yeah, she probably had up to an 8th grade education, but oh my gosh, the stories and the things that I probably learned more from her about life than I have from anyone else. Yeah, she had great stories. They had a big porch on the front. It was all screened in, and then they would have like beds out there. It was like a whole nother like portion of the house, because the farmers would go out there and they would take like a nap out there, and the breezes would come through. And then she would tell us stories when she was a little girl. Again, they had lived on that farm. She lived on that farm her whole life. And like in front of their house, there was railroad tracks. And they would like move pellets, you know, like iron ore pellets. So my sister and I used to go down to the railroad tracks and we'd walk them and pick up all the iron ore pellets. But my Aunt Helen would tell us that when she was a little girl, her and her brothers and sisters would take the railroad tracks to a one-room schoolhouse, and they used to carry sticks to keep the timber wolves away. I just thought yeah, what a way to get to school. And then they would bring, I can't remember what she called them, but they would heat them up so they could like put them like under their skirts to keep them warm when they were in the schoolhouse. And then they would bring lard sandwiches to school. Yeah. So, but we would have tea parties with her when we were girls growing up. And the winters when we'd go up and visit, they also had like a pond. So my dad would go out and shovel the whole pond off, and we would do ice skating. It was just very magical. So we'd be out in the winter ice skating, or we'd be able to do tractor rides with Uncle Adolf, and learned how to cut wood and pile it and all of those kinds of fun things. So I have really, really fond memories, and she just made the best apple pie and pecan cake, and so I have really fond memories. So that's how I was introduced to the UP.